Hey moms, it's Laura Ollinger. Welcome to the Positively Healthy Mom podcast. Because there's no manual for the hardest job in the world. Welcome to part 2 of my conversation with Dr. Janell Sosa, a family doctor.
And I would love to hear more about the advice you're giving to moms about the healthy meals, because that is the other struggle I can totally relate to. And I've been pretty anti-fast food. Like, I don't do fast food unless we do maybe Chick-fil-A if we're, we have to grab something. But 99% of the time, I'm pretty much cooking at home or getting something to eat in the house. But it's like, where do you even start with that? Like, there is no kind of dodging that bullet. You can get those meal plans, where they deliver the food to you. Maybe that's one of your suggestions. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
So looking at meal kits that, like Hungry Root or like Blue Apron or those kinds where they deliver like all the ingredients and the recipe, and, so that way you don't have to worry about thinking about, okay, well, what meals am I going to plan this week? Like, I need to make it to the store. I need to get all these things, and then all of that, which is just adds more headache. But yeah, the meal kits are a good way to kind of pre-meal plan. Some of them you can are good like freezer meals to where you can already have some ready to go. You just thaw them out, and then that saves you some time. The other thing is, if you don't do the meal kits, is trying to meal plan ahead of time. Things that you can take along. If you have late practices, late games, that'll work. Or keeping healthier snacks just with you in the car, because when you're hungry and you're driving, it's just like, oh, let's just go and grab something. And chances are that something isn't going to be like fruit or something like that. And so a lot of people get overwhelmed with all of these suggestions, and I can see it in their face. They're like, oh my gosh, that's an overhaul of like everything that we do. And so I kind of take a step back and I say, well, okay, are you a big like soda drinker? Are you a chicks person? Kind of what's your go-to bad thing? And so if they're like, yeah, I drink like 4 Dr. Peppers a day, I say, okay, well, let's start there. And, just trying to change little things at a time. Because if you try to go from, eating fast food like 4 nights a week and drinking sodas all day to all complete 180 to where you're trying to eat just all healthy and no sodas or anything, chances are that's not going to last super long. So again, kind of the same thing, making small changes over the period of a few weeks is usually more sustainable. And probably one of the best and biggest changes that people can visually see is when they cut back and stop drinking so many sodas, because that's the thing that has the most hidden sugar that I can tell that people usually have, and so sometimes even just by cutting down or cutting out their daily Dr. Peppers, they'll be down 5-10 pounds in a couple of weeks. Now that's not everybody, but I have seen it in enough people that it's like, man, that really does make a difference, and it's just a small thing. And then usually that's so encouraging that they start to make more and more changes, and so it's just kind of that one springboard thing that you sometimes have to find that's like, oh, okay, I do feel better. This did make a difference. Let's keep going.
Okay. Oh, that's really cool. I like that idea where you pick kind of like the worst thing that you're doing. And if you can just at least get that out, then you start to notice changes, and then that motivates you to then take the next steps. I love that concept. Okay. So another what I have just observed in more of a social sense, it's not so much clients telling me this, but I've just seen amongst friends that we women, especially with this age range, are on a vicious cycle of caffeine in the morning and alcohol at night. And I don't know if you see that or if your patients admit that to you, but I see moms chugging their coffee. And I know because I used to be one of them. I used to kind of during COVID. Well, maybe not during COVID is when I cut out some alcohol, but I used to be very stressed out, and that was the way I dealt with my anxiety and my stress. Then I became wiser, and I realized that's not the way to cope with stress. That's not the proper way. And so I started like cutting out alcohol. I really have very little alcohol in my life these days. But what do you say to those moms who are like kind of they're it's like almost like the gas and the brake every day, and they're on this vicious cycle. They need the energy, but then they need to wind down, and they need the energy, and they need to calm themselves down. What do you say about that?
So there's usually something more going on. so in our practice, and I would say with most physicians, it's going after the root cause is kind of what we're about. So getting kind of more in depth with it, what's been going on in your life? Is it work stress? Is it family stress? Is it all of the above? When did you kind of find that you started needing like 3-4 cups of coffee and then needing like an evening glass of wine? Like, when did that kind of start happening, and what was going on and what's going on now? Because usually it's stress. And so it starts, for example, it can start with they're just so stressed and they're trying to go to bed at night, and mind is just going. And so they don't get a good night of sleep. And so then of course in the morning, that 1 cup becomes 2 cups and to get them going. And then the day just goes the way that days go. And then, depending on when they have that second cup of coffee, then that can leave them more wired at night. And then of course they don't sleep as well the next night. And then they need to add more caffeine, which exacerbates the evening problem. And then, which is when a lot of people say, well, let me just have like a glass of wine or, whatever your go-to alcohol is, to kind of wind me down and then sleep. But it's putting a Band-Aid on the issue. And so usually having people kind of reset and kind of evaluate their day and, what am I doing that's really kind of triggering the stress and all of that, and see if some of that can be toned down. A lot of times it can't. And so then it becomes, what coping mechanisms can we incorporate here? We also talk about diet, because if you're just eating a bunch of not great stuff during the day, then that's going to impact how you feel during the day, and sometimes not get you to where you're sleeping very well at night. And there's a lot of things that are in play with just like a seemingly simple thing of caffeine and alcohol. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but there's a lot that can kind of be at the root of that, and it just takes some digging to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, no, I think that did answer the question quite well, because I think that's where I wanted to go with it. Like, a lot of people are in this habit and they're not even, it's not that they're not conscious of it. They know they're doing it, but like, they're not asking themselves those deeper questions. Like, why am I needing to do this? Like, how is this helping me? Like, is this really helping me? And is it really actually causing more of a problem? And so kind of like asking yourselves, and maybe this is a conversation that they need to have with their doctor, or like address these deeper concerns to figure this all out. And I'm super fascinated with like the whole like microbiome and like the gut health and the gut brain connection. Like, I think that's like seriously fascinating stuff. And so I don't think a lot of moms really necessarily equate those two. They're not really familiar with the science. Like, do you have any more that you could share about that specifically?
So yeah, the gut microbiome is a really cool thing. So just in very general terms for anybody who may not be familiar with what we're talking about. So in your intestines, there's all of this good bacteria. And so that's why you hear a lot about people taking like prebiotics, probiotics, that kind of thing. And so your good gut bacteria does a lot that you're may or may not be aware of. Of course, it helps with digestion and feeling better, but there is also a portion of that gut bacteria that synthesizes like serotonin and that kind of thing, like your happy brain chemicals. So if you're not taking care of your good gut bacteria, it's going to impact how you feel overall. And so taking care of that, and as eating as healthily as you can, which is hard, it does really have an impact on not just how you feel physically, but it can help how you feel mentally as well. And so for people who are kind of new to that idea, I usually just have them start with just try taking probiotics for 3-4 weeks, see how you feel, and then we can kind of go from there. And usually they say, I do notice a difference. I am feeling a little better, and not as bloated, not as irregular, not as just kind of feeling better physically and usually mentally as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with that whole brain fog thing, I know that I know for myself. Like, I think I had brain fog the first 5 years that my kids were born, and it's amazing now. I'm like, oh, I feel so much more clear. It's so awesome. I'm not so, like you said earlier, distracted and the ADD symptoms and just not really being able to think well. And I've worked really hard on. I don't know if I had leaky gut, but I suspect that I did, and so I cut out. Well, I have my whole hypothyroid thing. So I cut out gluten. I've cut out dairy. It turns out I'm allergic to eggs, which I didn't know, but I found through the blood test I did from your office. And, just trying to eat these good foods and really trying to pay attention to how that's making me feel overall, how's my energy? How's my brain fog? How's my clarity? All those things. So is there any other things? I know exercise is huge for that as well, but exercise, eating well, and then the stress management. What kind of, I know what I kind of recommend. What do you recommend as far as how people can manage their stress?
That's going to vary from person to person. And so it's really, if you're, I had a patient recently, for example, who has a lot of aggression, pent up aggression. And so for them, I suggest, something with impact exercise. So like boxing classes, or, something where they can get some of that out. Or, people who are in just loud, chaotic environments all the time, then usually I suggest something just going for a walk, in a park or something, just by themselves, no extra noise, just to kind of let their brain have a break. So really short answer is it just kind of depends on what your stress is, and then things that you like to do, and then kind of seeing what would be a good way to bridge that to kind of get your body to take a break from that stress while doing something that you like to do. And because that usually is something that's going to have the most benefit. Because if you're always in a loud environment and let's just say you like going to monster truck rallies or something, it's not really, you're going to enjoy it, but it's not really going to do much for your stress because you're still in that loud, chaotic environment that you're always in. And so it's not going to help much with the stress, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And that's actually a really great way to think of it that I'm not sure I ever consciously thought of, analyzing the type of stress that you have and then figure out what's going to be good for that. I usually just ask people what they like to do. Is it meditate? Is it breathe? Is it walk? But a lot of times when I'm talking to my teenage clients, I always say, would you prefer to speed your heart rate up, or would you prefer to speed it down, or lower it? Because I know when I'm feeling really anxious, when I get real high strung and anxious for whatever reason, if I jump on my Peloton bike and I just ride really fast and I get my heart rate up really high, then afterwards I feel so calm and I feel so relaxed. It's I have to go up to get down. But other times, certain clients, or I love to meditate too, where I want to slow it down. And so that just brings me to a whole different place where afterwards then I feel really peaceful and really, either way, you're kind of getting to the same destination. It's just how you're getting there.
Yeah, so yeah, I like that. I like that too. Yeah. I might steal that from you.
Okay, so moving on to, again, like older age range moms, where we're starting to see our kids go off to college. We're getting that empty nest syndrome. What do you see there with the moms that come into your practice?
So yeah, that becomes a little bit more of a complex thing, because yes, there is the seemingly sudden empty nesters where it's like, okay, I've been a mom for 18 plus years. What do I do now? And so it's a whole piece of a lot of women's identities that's now just kind of gone, where you're not the active everyday mom. You're just kind of you're more of a bystander now. And I can imagine, I'm obviously not there yet, but I can imagine that is a really, really hard transition to make. And so a lot of times, whether women are aware of it or not, they'll come to me saying, I'm just more irritable. I've got more of a temper now. My emotions are just all over the place. I cry super easily and I didn't used to, or I'm just so anxious all the time, or, all of these things, which can be related to that huge life change of now being an empty nester. But the other thing is usually around that age, also comes perimenopause and menopausal changes. And so it becomes a fun little game of is this like hormone changes? Is this anxiety, depression? Is this a combination of both? Is this thyroid issues? Is this a vitamin deficiency of some sort? There are so many things that can be going on all around that age range. And so it can feel, and this is the other common age that I hear moms saying, I feel like I'm going crazy. Like, I just don't feel like myself. And so, I tell them, you're not going crazy. You're not going crazy. And so usually just checking some blood work and ruling out those things, or ruling them in, either way, gives us more of a clear picture of, okay, is this kind of multifactorial, where there is the psychological stress going on, and you have, a thyroid issue going on, or is everything totally fine blood work wise, but you're just having a hard time managing this big life change. And then depending on what we see or don't see, then that way we can treat what's actually going on and get them feeling better again.
Yeah. Okay, so that's like a really, it is, like you said, a very complex answer. And, the thing is, our audience that listens and watches this show is literally around the world. And so they have different ways of getting medical care. And so I really want to give a shout out to specifically your practice. I absolutely love being a patient in your office because they make it so easy. But that being said, keep in mind that not everybody has that same access. And so let's actually talk about let's do that real quick. The benefits of your concierge, is that what it's called? Like a concierge doctor?
So concierge medicine is a little different from direct primary care. So concierge medicine, you think more of like somebody having like their own private physician that's just at their beck and call, like 24/7. So that's not us. So as direct primary care, we do have that increased availability. We do everything that you would have at a normal primary care office, but you get much more availability. You get direct contact with your doctor. My patients can text me questions, run things by me. We almost always have same day, next day availability if they do need to be seen. So, it's a more comprehensive and more personalized way of delivering primary care. But pretty much just the way that it should be, the way that we imagined it when getting into medicine. So
Yeah, which I just have to say I personally appreciate very much. Having 4 kids, it makes it really easy. And then for myself, I mean, I'm just really impressed with when I come to see my doctor in your office, I'm there for an hour because we literally go through every part of my life, every aspect, the mental, the physical, everything. And I love that she, always we're checking my blood. We're constantly just like seeing how things are, because it's not as simple as, like you said earlier, like y'all don't just put Band-Aids on something. You're really getting to the root cause. And so for me, that's like incredibly important to like dig down and figure out like what's causing this so we can actually solve it, instead of just like giving me a prescription and saying, here you go, this will help your symptoms, but we're like figuring out. So that's like really getting into the root of functional medicine. And I think that's fascinating. Okay, so we have just a few more minutes. And what if you could give, and I know we've talked about a lot of things, but if you could just summarize how you could help moms as far as giving them just some overall blanket advice that maybe things we haven't covered
yet. So what I find myself telling moms who are stressed and hard on themselves is you're doing fine. As long as your kids know that you love them and you're doing all that you can, then they'll be okay and you'll be okay. And really just to not be so hard on ourselves, because we're all figuring out as we go. and really just to give yourself a break. Nobody is a perfect mom, despite what social media may make you see. But you can't judge what another mom is doing as like perfect, because that may be good for their kid, but that may not be what your kid needs. And so you are your kid's mom for a reason. And so the way that you are a mother to them is probably what your kids need. And so it's hard to remember that. And so really just trying to focus on how you need to be a mom for your kids, and giving yourself a break is probably the best thing that I can that I tell moms sometimes. And just you're doing good. You're doing good.
Yeah. Well, that's super encouraging. And that's why we're here, to encourage and support moms and empower them. So that's the perfect way to end our show. So going forward, I can't imagine you want to give out your personal information, but if anybody I do have a pretty big audience here in Austin that people want to find your practice, where would you send them?
So just our website is probably the best place. So DirectMed.care is our practice's website. And we now have 4 locations. So there's probably a place close, if you're in Central Texas, that you could check us out and see if it'd be a good fit for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I so appreciate your time and spending.
Thank you for listening to the Positively Healthy Mom podcast, because there's no manual for the hardest job in the world. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends.